One of the more surprising announcements, to me at least, was that Valorant, which is a very highly competitive hero based shooter, kind of like Counter-Strike, honestly, kind of like Counter-Strike with hero classes, honestly, uh, that was actually coming to console. When this game launched 4 years ago on PC, I did not play it, largely because it did not have ultra wide support. I understand why they made that decision, because they wanted it to be very competitive and they felt that people who had ultra wide monitors make it an unfair competitive advantage. And I just didn't like the fact that I had to play a game with these giant letterbox bars on the side. So I installed Valorant. I tried it for about 2 minutes, uninstalled it, and honestly, I never played it again. And it really wouldn't have been until it was announced on console, namely the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S/X, that I even thought maybe I'd try it again. So, to my surprise, I'm watching the Game Awards. The Summer Games Fest, the showcase that Jeff Keighley did 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. And they announced that Valorant was coming to consoles. Sign up for your chance to get a beta. I did. I got one. And that's what you're looking at now. I'll point out that this gameplay footage is scraped from Twitch. I was streaming this earlier. So if things look a little pixely or particly, it is 100% on the conversion from the PlayStation uploading to Twitch, downloading to my computer, putting a voiceover to it, and then re-uploading it to YouTube. That said, the number I want you to keep your eye on is in the upper left-hand corner. That is the FPS, and you will see that it stays locked at 120 throughout this entire session. I did go ahead and put on all the diagnostic modes. You'll see those in the upper right as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to say that if you haven't yet played Valorant, or you're like me, either because you're an ultra-wide snob or because you're not much into gaming PC, I think you're going to like what you see here. This game has a very gorgeous aesthetic to it. And the fact that it runs so smoothly, putting really frame rate above everything else, makes it a very, very enjoyable experience. So Valorant, I'm not going to get into too much of the kind of gameplay behind it, because the reality is you've probably seen it by now. If you haven't, just think Counter-Strike. Teams of 5 go against each other. There's a buy phase at the beginning. Whatever gun you buy, assuming you win the match, you get to keep with you into the next phase. You can buy armor. You can buy powers. That's the big thing. That's what I talked about briefly when this video started, that there is a hero element to it as well. So each of the distinct heroes have unique abilities that will potentially sway combat on the battlefield, throwing fireballs, creating flame walls, healing areas, that sort of thing. That's going to give you, hopefully, a competitive edge against your opponents. But I have to say, I am so wildly impressed by how smooth this game ran on PlayStation 5. I was using my beloved DualSense Edge controller. So I had the 2 paddles in the back. Although I don't really think you need them. The way they did the button mapping in this is a little interesting, because there are so many hero powers. They put those on the, and everything can be redefined, right? But by default, they put some of the hero powers on the face button with circle. You also have your reload button, which is your pretty standard, I think, on every shooter ever. Reload is going to be square, I think, till the end of time. L2 and R2 are to aim. You press in one of the thumbsticks to crouch. You press in the other thumbstick to go into a true first-person view when you're aiming down sights. So by default, when you're walking around, because of the footstep meter, the analog controls are going to feel so good here. And I feel like that's something that was probably missing on PC, because if you're playing on a traditional keyboard, you just hit W to go forward. There was probably a modifier you had to press and hold, most likely on your thumb button or like your left pinky on shift or something, which allowed you to walk versus run. Here with the analog stick, it feels so much more intuitive. If you press the analog stick way forward versus just very lightly forward, you'll get into walking versus running. And footsteps matter immensely in this game. I feel like the sound design on this is so good. We'll talk about the 3D audio in just a second, but the sound design is so good that you're going to want to be able to hear those things. And walking versus running will absolutely play a very pivotal role in your combat engagements, which I think is really cool that they put that in. And that's just one of those console isms that you really wouldn't have gotten playing on a keyboard and mouse. But here, I think with the analog stick, you're going to get a little bit better control of your character, which, like I said, is going to allow you to kind of like sneak around a little bit more, which is extremely appreciated. So when you're walking around and in combat, I could not get over how smooth everything felt. Again, I think the locked 120 FPS has a ton to do with that. But also the game just seems to be very dialed down. Like you can see when I'm walking around how slow and methodical everything is. This is not a run and gun game. This is a game where you're going to take your time. You're going to probably do a lot of camping. You're going to sit behind doors. You're going to crouch around corners. You're going to take your time and wait and hope that other players are being a little more aggressive than you, and you're going to be able to pick them up with that insane sound design. Additionally, because of some of the mappings on the controller right now, it's not always in your best interest to run and crouch and jump and do all these crazy things that you would do in Call of Duty, like running around the corner and sliding or dolphin diving or anything like that. Not that this exists in this game, but it is a more plodding, methodical shooter that does reward you for that. And I feel like the gameplay has been tailored to that, and the controls are probably a little foreign in maybe some respects to some of the other first-person shooters you've played, because speed is not the name of the game here. It's all about, like I said, going slow and using your powers and taking your time, because the time to kill in this is ridiculously fast. Just a couple shots and you'll absolutely just destroy somebody. So that's, you're gonna be mindful of that as well. All right, so when you're playing, like I said, super smooth, feels good. What makes this game to me so enjoyable, though, really is the sound design. So all the different surfaces you walk on, they make, you know, different noises depending on if you're on grass or cobblestone, or if there's a grate below you that you're walking over. They all make distinct sounds, and I've got to believe that if you're somebody who invests a lot of time into this game, those sounds and all those little placements of everything that are on the ground are going to absolutely force you to play slightly differently, because you're going to hone in exactly where somebody is on the map. I can't stress this enough, how cool that is, that you have these different sound effects that really seem to play into the environment. And in a few times, in just a few matches that I played, I was surprised just walking through like my starting zone, for example, knowing where certain sounds were, that when I went around the corner, I could hear enemies coming up on me, and I could hear them walking over different platforms and grates and reloading and that sort of thing. And I was like, wow, that is really cool. I don't think you need to absolutely like sound whore this game. I know a lot of games, you know, they really want you to play with the equalizer settings, and some of my more popular videos, you've probably seen my audio playlist where I go through equalizer settings on most games and explain the difference between highs and lows and what power you need to have various frequencies at to get the most out of your sound design. You don't really have to do that here as much. Out of the box, it works pretty well, although I'm sure there's probably somebody who's refined sound a little bit more. But again, if you're taking your time and being slow and methodical, you're not going to have to do that. But just for kicks, because I knew that this was kind of a game that was pushing technology, at least on the graphical side, and seemingly on the audio side, I went ahead and fired up the 3D audio, and I gotta say, it sounds very impressive. I don't think it's something that the game designers actively designed to, considering this was a PC-only launch, and it didn't come to console till years later, but wow, does it sound really good with 3D audio. And again, because this game does rely so much on taking your time and does rely so much on situational awareness to make sure that you're walking through and you're methodically kind of taking out enemies and going slow, the sound design had to be so good, and it absolutely is. And I highly, highly love the game for that. And I'm not even really into this game still. I mean, I gotta admit, you know, I think my days of competitive third-person shooters are limited, but I could feel like this could be one of my like new forever games as I continue to pivot away from Call of Duty, and kind of Halo went into a more maintenance slash sustainment mode. This could absolutely scratch that itch. I think it plays very differently than a game like X Defiant, but because of how smooth it is and how beautiful the graphics are, and you have that kind of cartoon stylized art style, it's clean and it's fresh and it's rewarding, and I like it for that. Because it's right now on console, I feel like they've got a lot of the growing pains ported over. Like I said, when you walk with just the analog stick alone, you get incredible control in your character. But by holding down the iron sight button, you walk even slower. And then on top of that, you can quickly flip between kind of that slow walking and then a traditional aiming down scope or aiming down a barrel type shoot if you want to as well. So there's lots of not replayability, but there's lots of variance, I guess replayability in a sense, but there's more variance in how you want to engage in what feels natural and good to you. But in any of those modes, I think you're going to find how smooth it is. So the last thing I'll mention as I close out this video, because of the competitive nature of this game, and because this game was really built on these kind of purist, and you can go back and read the philosophy of this game. Like I said, ultra wide was a big thing that they removed right away. But something that they're really striving to achieve here is by limiting a lot of competitive edge that you would have by finding more standard servers, reducing server tick rate, or I guess technically increasing tick rate as much as possible to give you a nice smooth experience, which is why I was thrilled that they included all those gauges in the top right corner, which you obviously can't see now because my timing's perfect. And the one time I'm actually getting ready to talk about it, we're on the character select screen. But those gauges in the top right are really, really nice because it allows you to see a lot of good information. It allows you to show not only what server you are connected to geographically, which I think is massive. And from somebody who games out of the East Coast, where I think like 80% of the United States population lives on the East Coast, right? It's massively skewed that we're all here. Most of the data centers and servers are here. I never seem to have an issue connecting to major distribution hubs like Atlanta or Miami, or sometimes even as far as New York. Never really much farther west than that. I'm not pinging anything into Chicago or into the West Coast. But if you are somebody who lives in Midwest or Central or even West United States, I think you're going to really appreciate the fact that it tells you the server you're connecting to. So here you can see I'm going to be connecting to a server in North Virginia. You could see my ping in the top right, and I don't know why games do this. This thing is so damn small. I was trying to play this on my TV. I had to walk in front of it and get really close, like squinting. My eyes were hurting so bad I could barely see. But you have your ping. They've also included your shooting error, which is going back and showing you the difference between what your client pressed versus what the server is seeing, which I think is massive, and I really feel like will eliminate people's need to say, oh, it was lag, or oh, the server screwed me, or I wasn't there, or I experienced a phantom bullet, or I experienced a super bullet, or I shot and it ate my input. I did my super ability and the game didn't register it. All that information up there I think is so monumental in that, if nothing else for your own sanity, to make you a better player. You know, it's easy to complain about, oh, I wish I'm a better player than this, right? Like, this shouldn't have happened. I'm too good for that to happen. But the reality is, in a situation like this, where you have this kind of control and you have this kind of data input, I think it's important to see all the data available to help you understand that it wasn't necessarily the server is the reason you lost that firefight. It's because you weren't good enough. And now the facts are going to actually put that forward. And I can't honestly think of a game that has ever done that before from a technical standpoint that has given that much information in a console game to really help lean into the idea that you are playing an optimal match against other players in the same area, all connecting to a similar server. Here's the kind of your frame rates, that sort of stuff. I can't recall a game ever in console space that has done that. Now, we do see that a lot on the computer side of things. You see that a lot in games where you'll be able to really deep dive into packet loss and latency and ping, and you can map servers and you could force the game to put you in certain servers. You see a lot of pros doing that, installing third-party software to force themselves to be in an optimal location. But here you don't have to do that. The game just has it built in for you. And I think that really wins my respect, alone from obviously the really smooth gameplay and how fun it was, and you know, the tension you get when you're like the last player on the team. And I'm sure there'll be a grind in terms of, you know, how many characters you need to unlock and different types of weapons and skins and that sort of stuff. But just the sheer joy of playing a game that has put so much emphasis into that competitive element, it feels really, really good. So I'm a big fan of this. I don't know if they've released a date yet. I think the beta is lasting, I want to say it's almost a month. So that's why I kind of feel like they're opening it up to a lot more people. I don't think my winning a code was super exclusive. I mean, I'm guessing probably anybody who wanted a code could have got one. I don't know. But I haven't really seen a lot of people in their videos talk about what I just talked about, which is why I really want to do this video, is to explain some of the technical stuff driving it in the background. I think this is a fun game. I think it's definitely worth watching. I think I'll be intrigued to see if this real good attention to detail does ultimately start to trickle into other shooters, particularly Call of Duty, which has a very poor networking monitor system. That's about all it has, just to show you a very generic kind of ping test in one of the menus, but it's not even something you can leave live on screen all the time. Here you can keep that on and you can get a lot more information on data, and I love that. So big fan of what Valorant is, what it's going to be. And like I said, even though it's not my daily driver for a shooter, I could see it becoming that very quickly. Hope you guys found this video informative. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.